The Suez Canal blockage of 2021 caused a global trade disaster, and also gave us a fantastic meme template. But there are plenty more places on planet Earth where a similar blockage or trade disruption could happen. Let's find out where they are. But before that, please subscribe to my channel. It will immensely help and encourage to do research and bring new topics. Sometimes, geography plays tricks, and global choke points are places where geography has funneled human activity into a narrow band through convenience or necessity. For example, the Suez Canal, which is an artificial waterway that was dug through Egypt during the 1800s, because that was way more convenient than going the long way round. Without getting too bogged down by numbers, the Suez Canal is super important for oil from the Gulf countries and products manufactured in Asia getting to Europe and North Africa, and vice versa. But, looking at the map, we can see that the Suez Canal isn't the only tight squeeze on this journey. Just at the other end of the Red Sea, nestled between Yemen, Djibouti and Eritrea, is this little stretch of water, called Bab Al-Mandeb. Other than those vessels that start or end their journey at one of the Red Sea ports, every vessel traversing the Suez Canal will also have to make its way through Bab Al-Mandeb. So, any issue with this strait could have a devastating effect on global shipping in the same way. Bab Al-Mandeb is about 30 kilometers wide, which is narrow for such an important piece of water, but it's nowhere near as skinny as the Suez, so one ship running around won't block it. However, there are loads of other potential threats to any waterway this narrow, such as regional conflicts, piracy, and extreme weather events. As we cross the Indian Ocean, we get to our next choke point, the Strait of Malacca. This narrow stretch of water between the Malay Peninsula and the island of Sumatra is responsible for most of the large-scale maritime traffic heading to or from East Asia in a westerly direction. Oil from West Asia is a big one here. It's a similar width to Bab Al-Mandeb, but it feeds into the much narrower Singapore Strait. One ship won't be able to block these straits, but at times visibility can be greatly impaired by bushfires on Sumatra, and piracy has been an issue in the past, although the neighboring countries are working hard to stamp it out. Likewise with the choke points of the Red Sea, if there's a problem with the strait, you can take the long way round, although thankfully it's not quite so circuitous as circumnavigating Africa. The next closest passage, the Sunda Strait, is super shallow, so that's no good to cargo ships. The Lombok Strait is actually deeper than Malacca, so provides a good second option, although a significant detour. Continuing our journey east, we cross the Pacific and get to the Americas, and of course, the Panama Canal. Many videos have been made about this one, but in a nutshell, it connects the east and west coasts of the Americas, as well as being another route between Asia and Europe. While the Panama has multiple lanes and sections that traverse lakes, there definitely are sections that could be blocked by a single ship. The Panama Canal also has locks, rather than being a sea-level canal. While the Suez Canal may be more affected by the elements in the form of tides and sandstorms, the Panama Canal's locks do introduce another point which could fail and cause a blockage. If the locks were to somehow massively fail, either mechanically or by another cause such as violent weather or cyber attack, it could cause a huge slowdown in global trade. Although thankfully none of these scenarios are very likely, given the thousands of ships that safely transit the canal every year. The Europeans don't feel left out. Let's cross the Atlantic and pick one of the choke points over here to talk about. The Strait of Gibraltar is the western outlet for the Mediterranean, just like the Suez Canal is the artificial eastern outlet, along with the Dardanelles and the Bosporus, which connects to the Black Sea in the northeast. The Strait of Gibraltar has been strategically important for centuries since the seafaring nations of antiquity started trading in the Mediterranean. So much so that the British still managed to possess Gibraltar, a tiny, fortified piece of the Iberian Peninsula to the north of the strait. Otherwise, the strait is bound by Spain and Morocco. These days it connects the Suez Canal with the countries of northern Europe and connects the rest of the Mediterranean with the Americas and West Africa. At around 15 kilometers wide, it is thankfully again not possible to be blocked by a single cargo ship. You'd need about 70 placed end to end to block it. But it could certainly be blockaded by a fleet if catastrophic war were to somehow break out in the Mediterranean. In fact, it had been proposed in the 1920s to purposefully block the strait with a dam, to generate electricity and lower the sea level in the Mediterranean. An interesting but also very terrible idea. These were just a few of the global maritime choke points around the world, but there are obviously more. We are trying to cover most of them as you are so far in this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed yet. The Danish Straits twist between Germany in the south, Sweden in the east and among the various islands of Denmark. They connect the countries of the Baltic Sea to the North Sea. They can get pretty narrow, with the Swedish mainland only 4 kilometers away at its closest point. Unless of course you take a shortcut. The Kiel Canal, or Nord-Ost-Sea Canal, will let you cut down the length of your journey by avoiding most of the straits. So, why are the Danish Straits so important on a regional scale? Well, it's the only route by which some of the Baltic countries can transfer sea freight, as well as the usual answer oil. Russia produces a lot of oil, and about worth of 3 million barrels per day gets shipped through the Danish Straits. Another choke point that Russian oil must navigate are the Turkish Straits. The Bosporus and the Dardanelles, which are both in Turkey. These straits connect the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. More accurately, the Dardanelles connects the Aegean Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean, to the Sea of Marmara, and the Bosporus connects the Sea of Marmara to the Black Sea. For anyone needing a refresher, the Dardanelles is formed by the Gallipoli Peninsula protruding parallel along the coast of the Biga Peninsula. It's little more than 1 kilometer wide at its narrowest point, and is subjected to strong currents, making it a challenge to navigate. The Bosporus on the other hand is even narrower, at only 700 meters wide at its narrowest point. It's straddled by the city of Istanbul, but is still an important shipping route, connecting the countries of the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and beyond. Although, in the coming years it could share that burden with the Istanbul Canal. A proposed waterway that Turkey is planning to build to the west, which would divert ships away from the Bosporus. Inside the Black Sea we find yet another choke point, the Kerch Strait. The Kerch Strait is sandwiched between the Kerch Peninsula, which is a part of the Crimean Peninsula in the west, and the Taman Peninsula in the east. It connects the Black Sea to the mini-Mediterranean Sea of Azov. Mediterranean here used as an adjective meaning surrounded by land, and not as a proper noun as in the Mediterranean Sea. That's right, it's a Mediterranean Sea connected to a Mediterranean Sea, connected to a Mediterranean Sea, connected to the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, a ship traveling from Ukraine to the UAE could pass through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Mediterranean seas, as well as traveling through a choke point within a choke point, within a choke point, within a choke point, within a choke point before getting to the Indian Ocean and completing the journey with yet another choke point. Isn't geography fun? The final set of choke points for this video requires a bit of illustration. Imagine you're shipping goods between Europe and Asia. You could navigate the meandering, tortuous mess of choke points that is Europe, Africa, and Asia. You could spend extra fuel, money and time traversing the breadth of the Pacific Ocean, going via the Panama Canal and onwards across the Atlantic. Or you could take a more northerly route, cutting across the Arctic Ocean, between the continents of North America and Asia, and dipping through the Bering Sea, into the North Pacific and on to East Asia. This route is much shorter than going via the Indian Ocean or the Panama Canal and could save ships a lot of time and money. There are a couple of options when transiting the Arctic. The Northwest Passage cuts between Greenland and Canada, and then winds between Canada's Arctic islands. The Northeast Passage peels around the northern coast of Norway, before following the Northern Sea route along Russia's Arctic coastline. Of course, the viability of both of these sea routes is dictated by the amount of sea ice, which varies by time of the year. A side effect of the sad reality of climate change is the diminishing sea ice in the Arctic Ocean, which will inevitably increase the shipping traffic through the Arctic. In fact, if sea ice continues to melt, the shortest route of all could open to shipping: the transpolar sea route, which cuts across the middle of the Arctic Ocean. So now we know about these 3 possible routes to get us between Asia and Europe. We can see that they all funnel into the little stretch of water that sits between Russia and the US, the Bering Strait. It's technically about 83 kilometers wide, but thanks to this little pair of islands that helpfully sit in the middle, it's about 35 kilometers wide on either side. 35 kilometers is definitely not the narrowest of global choke points, but because of its proximity to 2 superpowers and its increasing global importance in the decades to come, as shipping through the Arctic increases, it definitely deserves a spot on this list. A choke point of increasing importance, sitting right between Russia and the US. What could go wrong? Well, thanks for joining me on this virtual tour of global choke points. If you haven't subscribed my channel, please subscribe my channel and you can check other interesting videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.